The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, we're good? Okay, 7:03, the meeting, the Historic Landmark Board for October 20th, 2020 is called to order. I believe we start with a roll call.
Matthew Bell,
Here.
Gargi Gupta,
Here.
Linda Graybill,
Here.
Karen Hardy,
Here.
Mary Oswell,
Here.
Tennille Wood,
Here.
Anna Lesky,
Here.
all present and accounted for.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. Next, we move on to consideration of the minutes of the preceding meeting. I believe the date of that was June 24th, 2020. Are there any concerns or comments regarding the meetings of the previous meeting? Okay, seeing none, I move that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you very much. Consideration of the meetings have been moved and seconded. And now the important business of the new business. We move right on to. I'm sorry.
Point of order, we need to do a roll call for the approval of the minutes.
Oh, I apologize.
Matthew Bell,
Yes.
Gargi Gupta,
Yes.
Linda Graybill,
Approved?
Karen Hardy,
Yes.
Mary Oswell,
Yes.
Tennille Wood,
Yes.
Anna Lesky.
Yes.
Thank you. On not the business of the day of electing a new board chair. Not sure the process here. As interim, I must tell you I've opted not to seek reappointment just for personal reasons. I've decided to open my options up for the next couple of years to possibly outside of the state. So I won't be available for that nomination or that position. So.
Well, okay. Let me just make a quick point of order here, just a little background information on how the process works as your liaison. It should be noted that we no longer have an alternate because Anna Lesky was approved to move up to a full member. So the alternate position is now vacant. And as most of you are aware, or all of you are aware, James Browning, unfortunately, due to work commitments, was unable to serve in the capacity that we needed and has resigned. So that leaves the board position vacant as well. And from the sound of it, this is not something that Matthew wishes to continue with. I should point out that recruitments for boards and commissions will start shortly to start in the new year. So I know that we will be making additional appointments in consultation with council shortly. However, we will need to decide who is going to be the president or the chair for this group. So you would basically, we can have a discussion who would be interested in taking it, but then you have to make a motion and it has to be voted on by membership.
Do we, I guess, open up for nominations, or does somebody, I guess, step forward, volunteer? I wasn't here for the last time this seat was vacated, so I didn't know how that went either.
Well, if we were all together, we would just draw straws or scream not it, but just kidding. Typically, it's just a discussion that the members had, and I think that's how we arrived at it. I know that Karen has served as a temporary for some time, but wished to remain as the
vice.
the
Sure.
vice. Yeah. So
That's still true.
So does anybody have any interest? I'll just prompt.
Okay, I'm going to nominate Gargi.
Oh, you're terrible.
Thank you.
How about I nominate somebody else? Am I allowed to do that? Because my whole thing is if I then bail out on you guys thanks to what's going on with the state, then you will all get mad at me because midway you shouldn't do that. And I feel really strongly about that. That's why I'm always nervous to say I'm going to be happy to serve in the role. It's not that I have a problem serving with it, but I know I have made overcommit myself, and that concerns me. I'm bad about it.
If I may say so, for those of the newer members who maybe are hesitant to throw their hat into the ring, we have so many outstanding board members who have been with us for so many years and who are an excellent support to bring you up to speed quickly. But we do need to have somebody fill that role clearly. So I don't know if that might be a little more persuasive, but Gargi, Linda, Karen, great veterans, Mary, great experience. So there's a lot of knowledge to support you. And certainly if one of the veterans wants to stand up.
Nice, thanks, Anna, whoever did that. I will put it to you this way. I will be willing to do it. I'm not planning on going anywhere. So I don't see any reason that I would be gone at any time this year. But I will certainly depend on the support of the committee as well as Rich to make sure I say the right things at the right times, because I know that from watching Matthew do it, more than anything else, you have to be able to say everything in the meeting in the right order, in the right way. And you know, I would be willing to try to do that with the help if everyone else is willing to row with me.
Absolutely, yes. I am more than happy to support. It's just that I feel really bad when I bail on a certain meeting, then people don't have the person there.
Well, and I know, having watched how things went last year, because we had this unknown void at the top, not that Matthew didn't step in very well. I do think that there have been times that that's made things tougher, and
Yeah.
So yes, I will accept if everyone is interested in that.
Oh, fantastic. Unless there's any other nominations or discussion, seeing none, I believe we would do roll call vote for.
So we would we would start with the motion.
Yeah, this is Anna. I move that we appoint Mary Oswald as chair.
I second the motion.
All right, so moved and seconded.
The roll call would be Matthew Bell,
I accept or approve.
Gargi Datgupta,
Yes, I approve too.
Linda Bravio,
I approve.
Aaron Hardy,
I approve, and thank you, Mary.
Mary Oswell,
I guess I better approve.
Tennille Wood,
I approve and also say thank you, Mary.
and Anna Lesky.
Do I have to approve since I moved it?
It sounds good.
Okay, yes, I.
I love this.
Unanimous, and congratulations to
Yes.
new board
Thank
chair.
you, Mary. I
Thank you very
really
much.
appreciate it.
I promise you, Mary, I made it look way harder than it is.
It's so funny, Matthew.
All right.
We
last
will
one
miss
I
you
shared
if
it
you're
with you.
gone, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
It's not an easy decision to make, but I just didn't feel like I could commit to 2 more years. Just like you, Gargia, I would hate to abandon midstream like that.
I know.
Well, I suppose that is a unanimous approval of Mary Oswell as board chair. You want to take it here, or?
No, you can finish out yours.
Oh, boy, okay. In that case, we'll go on to the next item of new business, discussion of the 2020 goals from the boards and commissions onboarding session back in January, including the historic marker program and the awareness campaign. Is there anything from staff, sir?
Well, to be clear, I think they're both related because they're both really tied to awareness, because obviously having a marker program brings awareness to what we're trying to accomplish and how we're promoting and celebrating our heritage and our landmark properties. So I'm here to facilitate this communication. I know that we've talked about this in the past. There apparently, and this was news to me, and I thank our longstanding members for bringing this to attention. At one point, there were markers produced. And lo and behold, I actually found some of these said markers in a closet where they've been sitting for about 10 years. Imagine my surprise. So there was an attempt. Now, they're not necessarily comprehensive because I have not been able to determine which ones might be missing yet. They're quite heavy and they're quite large. And I believe the original intent of these markers, and Linda, you can help me remember this correctly, but I think the intent was to have them embedded actually in the sidewalk because they're rather large. And I think they were quite expensive, frankly, because they're so large and they're brass or bronze. I can't remember. I could like barely lift it off the ground. But
Yes.
I haven't personally seen any in place. And so I wanted to ask if any of the members who were here at that time remember seeing them actually in place or has any knowledge of what's out there currently, because that I do not have. And of course, with COVID, I haven't been going into the office or exploring, but I can certainly do that. Linda,
Okay.
do you have any?
Yes. I think in the document I sent you, it does say the location. They're up and down Bradburn, up and down Lowell on 73rd. There's one outside the Bowles house. There's some in some other places. The ones that have not been placed yet are mainly because there's no sidewalk. So you are correct. This was a matching grant that was initiated by Vicki Bunsen years ago. And so they're already paid for. And there should be money in the budget for the installation too, because that was all one big lump sum.
Do we know which sites these are made for specifically?
Yes. Yeah, they're already made.
Mhm.
And I think in the document that I gave Rich, it says which ones have not been placed of the 24.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, and I'd have to go count again, I think I found either 5 or 6 of them.
For instance, the stagecoach stop, there was no sidewalk there. I think the Rudolph house, the sidewalk kind of peters out, so there's no sidewalk there.
If these are, if we have right-of-way access to them, I mean, I'm assuming we could probably put in a concrete footer of some sort and mount these to them if there's no sidewalk.
That's up to the city.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably the only way forward without a sidewalk.
All the others are on a continuous sidewalk. So there's several on Bradburn. I think there's up to 7 on Bradburn, and 1, 2, 3, 3 or 4 on 73rd, several on Lowell. As you go north, let's see, the water tower. I don't think that one was placed. I'm not sure. That would be in the cul-de-sac if it were placed. But yeah, there's quite a few. But like you said, they're all made. That part is paid for, and the funds for placing them are there too, somewhere in the budget.
But if I'm not mistaken, Linda, some of the markers are not connected to things that the board has landmarked. They're historic in other ways, as opposed to what we've landmarked, versus I think there are things we've landmarked that there aren't markers existing for as well.
Right, exactly, because what's her name, our famous murderess,
Ma
you know,
Barker, yeah.
she's never been landmarked, you know, but this was done through the city, not through the Historical Society. So that's what makes it different.
And to be clear, these are plaques that actually have educational text with them. They're not simply a marker like a historic property with a number or anything like that, or just a name. I've seen a number of samples recently, as a matter of fact, as part of the certified local government community. They were sharing their markers, and so they run the gamut from small medallions that you'll see posted actually on homes to these types of full educational displays. So I wouldn't say that it makes any sense to scratch and start from zero, and we would continue with these since they were done, and obviously they were significant cost associated with them. So what I would propose then, if it so pleases the board, is to take a more serious inventory of them. I was just delighted to find them, but actually put them out, make sure I can confirm which ones we have, and then correlate it to what might be missing, or certainly what might be replaced. I'm assuming all the ones that were placed still survive, but we should make sure, go do an inventory. And that's something that I would be happy to support the board by doing.
I think they're all bronze, so they're really durable. The most that would have to be done is a sweeping, because it is a raised relief of the letters. Sometimes dirt or whatever gets caught in there, but otherwise they're in really good shape.
So can I ask a question? Once we do the inventory, considering that this seems to be the right way to go because it seems to be durable the way we've gone before, and you know, there's already stuff in place. It's also got some educational text on it. My concern would be if for the missing ones, if you will, if we have to add more, we may need to consider the budgetary constraints, because I'm pretty darn sure if the city is in the same shape that the state is in, we are considering postponing all non-essential, like kick the can down the road.
I definitely appreciate that, Gargi, and you are correct. We are you know, very careful in the current climate. A lot of our CIP funds we're not spending because of that. That's very true. But I would feel a lot better knowing that we've done the inventory, so we know exactly where we stand, so that when we are able to begin committing those funds, we'll know what we need to do. We do keep a CIP fund that's dedicated towards maintenance of historic properties, and this might be something that we can justify spending out of that pot at the appropriate time when we're given a clear to do so. As for the grant, I mean, that was 10 years ago, and I know there's no pot of marker money out there sitting, at least that I'm aware of. But there is money.
Rich?
Yes.
I did some research on that, and supposedly there's still money that was set aside for the finishing of placing the ones that you have at the city. Not for any new ones, but for that.
So that would be probably I'd check with the community development where the program used to live, or possibly with transportation if they had sent money aside as part of their maintaining streets and sidewalks.
I thought it was Parks and Rec could have been the department. I had that information before, but
Yeah, it wouldn't be-
COVID-19 has taken control of my brain.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't be Parks and Recs. I know we don't have that sitting there, but Parks and Rec does have the CIP for maintenance. At any rate, let me look into that, and when we cross that bridge and we get to it, we will find the way to pay for it.
Well, and having an inventory of what we have and the shape it's in, and what we have that isn't placed, and what we've landmarked that we don't have a sign for, gives us a place to start from.
Absolutely.
And that, I think that's important.
I live here in Harris Park where I see these all the time, and I imagine the ones in the closet are in as good or better shape than the ones embedded in the street out in the elements. So that doesn't concern me much. As a completionist, I agree with Gargi. It would be lovely to have them all done eventually, but I do think it's a good idea to get what's bought and paid for done and over with. And then I think the design is simple enough that we can replicate throughout the years whenever the budgets come through.
Absolutely.
So,
we know of at least one that we would need to add, of course, which is the Presbyterian Church that we recently designated.
Yep.
That would be one.
well, and I think there's some other, I was doing a little inventory of the list today because I went over to our site on the Westminster City to look at the list of what is landmarked. And I came up with a discrepancy that I was going to ask about anyhow, which is that on the city's site, it lists the Wick silo as landmarked, but it doesn't come up on the list that we get every meeting. Nor does it come up as owned by somebody else but historic site. So that's
right. There are some discrepancies, and there is some cleaning that needs to be done, because I think in a previous earlier iteration of this program, there was a decision made to include other historic sites that were not designated. And there's also a little bit of confusion because some have certain types of designation. They're not local, but they're national, or they might be, so there's like one or two. So yeah, the list, it's hard to reconcile. But I do have them all listed at some place or other. I think we should really focus on the ones that have the official designation, because that's kind of the purview of this board, obviously. And there may be some sites that we consider historic, but if they're not designated, I don't know that that's really under this board.
But that's my point. On the city site, under our board, it lists both the Wick silo and the Forney barn, sorry about that just burned down. That was never landmarked either. So that site is a little off in itself too. That's why I was curious.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because there are some things that do need some housekeeping that needs to be done on that. So I've made a note of it.
Okay. But the other thing that I wondered, and this is because the properties that we own as a city, the next time city signage goes in and says it's time to put a new sign on something, I think it would be nice if it mentioned that whatever that thing was had been landmarked by the city with respect to the cemetery, Semper, some of those places where there's official Westminster City signage, where you're talking about painting another line on the sign. And I know that would be not a start right away and replace those signs, but I know those signs do over time go through replacement. So it was a thought that would be a way to make sure that those things that we own are well signed beyond the existing brass markers.
So Mary, are suggesting that when the opportunity arises to expand or redo the signs or whatever, that we note that these are local landmarks?
Yeah, I mean, I walk, to be honest, this has nothing to do, but I walk past an open space sign 5 days a week when I take my walk, and there's plenty of room on that. If that same kind of sign is in front of, well, I mean, I know there's news signage at the cemetery and there's signage at Semper and all of those things. If it said, you know, City of Westminster Historic Landmark, or, you know, some phrase, there's no extra cost when the time comes for those signs to be redone for them to be noted. Because the thing about the brass markers is they are lovely, but you have to walk right across them to see them. So
I think going along with kind of that, just a matter of re-stenciling signs or whatever it takes. The next issue was kind of bilingualism, and maybe that would be another point to bring up in that same exact venue or vein. Maybe a bilingual sign as well.
So if I may say, when we do the inventory, Rich, maybe that is something that is brought up to the rest of the city departments, because this is not something that the landmark board has purview over. The signage that we are talking about adding on to, the city and planning commission would probably have to approve something like that, because it's a general sign and we want to add on to it. I think the city would be game for it, but it would not be something we can bring up. It would more be something that Rich brings up in one of those department meetings.
Yes, and there is actually a language initiative that's currently under study at the city in terms of how to improve on dual language across the city. So I know there are groups working on it. I'm not on that committee, but can certainly pass those concerns along because they're good ones.
For future reference, if the opportunity arises to do signage for some of the locally landmarked properties or National Register properties that don't now have landmarks, I would think that we could apply for an SHF grant for those things.
Yeah, and again, that sort of goes into the same vein, knowing what the budgetary issues with state are. The SHF grant cycles are kind of up in the air right now, I can tell you that. Every quarter, it's an interesting dynamic when we discuss budget. So great idea, but I can just caution all of us, we'll probably be waiting at least into 2022, if not 23, before we start seeing some monies come through. They're taking away funds from my projects, folks.
We're going to have a lot of bake sales.
I know.
Okay, I do want to make one correction or clarification. Not all of the city's historical landmark sites are city-owned. We don't put that distinction on them. The O'Gorman House is private. Obviously, the Westminster University is private. So that's not in the actually verbiage of the landmark board, whether it's public or private owned, except I will tell you as a historical person, the ones that are city owned are available to the public, where the private ones usually are not.
Good point, Linda. So that brings up two strains that we probably have to follow. Once we have the inventory that Rich will bring up, there are Mary's idea of putting the low cost, just put it on the signage, will apply to more of the public spaces and things that are owned by the city, which would be the purview of the city. Whereas privately owned ones, we would have to approach it differently because we are still landmarking them.
In the case of National Register properties, and I know in some other communities, if it's a privately owned property, the owner has to provide the funding for the signage.
I know here in Harris Park, the Alma Rig House has one of these plaques, and it's not, I don't think it's one of our sites, but it's in the public sidewalk and you don't have to trespass to read it or anything. I don't think, I mean, I wonder if that would be a situation where the owner would be on the hook for anything. It doesn't seem like they would be.
And just to speak to that, I think most private owners would be happy to have a little sign up there, but for the most part, if it's a financial burden, they would not be as willing, which is the reason why the city, if we have funds available, it would be fair to help them out, because we are, it's under our purview to landmark those properties as well. So I can understand why the trepidation of owners to take on a, financial burden to do something additional. But I also know that our challenge will be, we first want to prioritize which ones we do, because we can't do them all in one fell swoop.
So Rich, when you get the full inventory, can you share it with us?
Absolutely. That will be added to our agenda for an update for the first meeting of next year. Yep, our next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other comments or concerns regarding new business from our boards, our goals from our board and commissions onboarding session? All right, seeing none. Moving on to consideration of old business. Updates on historic properties.
So the only update that you noticed on the packet you were sent was that we were finally able to complete the approved repairs at the Semper and Allison Farm for the two roofing projects. They were delayed for one reason or another, weather, materials, but we finally were able to get those completed. So that is what you're seeing on the list.
Okay, great. Moving on to conferences, education. Karen, was that you who attended? I'm not sure if Karen can speak to us. I don't think I've heard her voice yet.
Yes, I can.
I'm sorry. I saw you messaging on the side and I was confused. I hadn't heard you.
So you had a question for me?
Oh, well, the next issue would be conferences, I believe. Didn't you go to? Oh,
Yes.
I don't have.
And Rich was kind enough to share my conference notes with all of you. So thank you, Rich.
You're welcome. And if you haven't seen your mailbox earlier today, I did send each of you those notes, as Karen so kindly does every year. She compiled a very comprehensive list of notes from the session she attended. So thank you once again, Karen, for sharing those with the full group.
Happy to do so.
I have to confess, Rich, you sent me the information because I had said I would be interested and I just couldn't make the time. Always happens.
Plenty, no expectation that you would review it all by tonight, of course. I was planning to send it either before the meeting or immediately after. I just chose to send it this morning while it was fresh in my mind.
May I speak to a few of the sessions?
Of course.
I found it fascinating. I'm going to comment on a few. It's not a ghost town. And it talked about tours for adults, tours for children. I do have 3 detailed student tours that I have put together and used for many years. One to the Old Wadsworth area, one to the northwest section, Jeffco side of Westminster, and one to the northeast section. And these are all annotated. Some of it's drive-by, and so I actually have addresses and little comments and activities. So if anyone has a teacher that wants to do something like this, I already have it in place for you. What's going on in Congress and across the states? I was fascinated about, and maybe you can speak to this, Karen. The National Park Service has a deferred maintenance backlog of $12 billion. 47% of its resources are historic properties. I know as a member of OCTA, Oregon California Trail Association, we applied to the National Park Service for signage of the Cherokee Overland Trail going through Westminster. And so I would like to keep this on site as well. Is that correct, Karen? That's a correct response?
My understanding that the backlog on maintenance, including for historic properties, is within the national park boundaries, and I'm not sure with the trail system how that fits. You'd actually have to ask somebody in the Park Service.
Well, we went to a meeting about 5 years ago, and it definitely is under the purview of the National Park Service.
Because I know it's under their purview. I just don't know if they have responsibility to maintain those trails that traverse multiple states. If they include that in their backlog maintenance budget.
I can speak to it because I used to work on Park Service, was one of my clients on many, many projects. The line item construction usually does not include maintenance of things that the Park Service does not own. So your deferred maintenance funds that they're talking of backlog on, they will not include any sort of deferred maintenance on property they do not own. They will support you. They'll have grants when they have a line item construction budget, which is fluffy enough. And as we know, in the last couple of years, they have seen cuts even pre-pandemic in their line item construction budget.
What's interesting is where the trail goes through is in part public land. And of course it comes from out of state. So that's how the National Park Service got involved. But yeah, I understand the maintenance thing.
You know, to speak to this, one
under
of the
the
other
same
areas,
section, yes, in my backward.
Sorry, did I speak over you? What I was just going to say, Linda, is it's possible, and I don't know the details of this, but I do know I ran into this when I was working with Park Service, that sometimes when it's public land, some of the funds that you want to get for some of that deferred maintenance, you could even go to BLM, because again, this is Department of Interiors, and so they have certain areas that they will pull funding from if they have it available.
If they have it available. Yeah, that was said to us before. Under yes in my backyard, not in my backyard, I've been in close association with the Uplands movement for a variety of reasons, but I am keeping the historic element to the forefront. In fact, I have told the developers as they're digging up the land, they'll probably find a lot of arrowheads. In fact, in our own playground at Bellevue Christian, arrowhead came to the surface of the sand about 3 years ago, an obsidian arrowhead. So there's still lots out there. And so, yeah, that's going to be our backyard in a sense. And there's a lot of historic nature there. I thought the whole thing on beginning with the brain and mind was fascinating because that's one of my areas of research. And so that was all very timely. Key tools of deliberate engagement, excellent, very, very good. I would have everybody read that carefully because it has, you know, and Karen, you've got a lot of websites that I couldn't access at that time. Cemeteries, I'm passionate about, the good, the bad, the ugly. And then the student presentations were also very, very good. So thank you, Karen. This is just a whole wealth of information that you have given us.
You're welcome. I hope that, you know, one or more of the presentations will have special appeal to someone or be useful in whatever your particular areas of interest are. If you can't access one of the links, I think I tried to put in the title or the name or something so that you can just simply Google it and find it that way, hopefully. So, and a comment with regard to the uplands, insofar as the city has jurisdiction with the ground disturbing activities there, I would strongly encourage them to require the contractors or whoever is digging in the dirt to stop and notify the city if they come across artifacts or, for heaven's sakes, in the unlikely eventuality that they encounter human remains, which is the purview of the state archaeologist, to have oversight, that the city would encourage them to stop and contact the city for starters.
I agree wholeheartedly.
So I was going to ask that question. I know on federal land, again, going back to the Park Service, when you encounter something, the first thing they do when they know there's a potential for historic markers or arrowheads or what have you, you have to do, just like when you encounter abatement, you pause, and there's a rule and a law, you're mandated to do a survey. So does the city have that for any of our properties where when we are saying we're doing any kind of work and you happen to encounter either arrowhead artifacts or human remains, you pause? And does the city have that kind of a rule that we have to then, it kicks in a requirement for archaeological survey, because that's the only way historic properties can be protected. I wonder if we have that. I don't know.
I don't know either, and it's something that I'm happy to look into and report back to the group. I don't know. I seem to remember, or I thought that was at the state level, because I remember at a previous Saving Places conference that topic coming up, and I seem to think that it's somehow tied to state. But I will look into that. I've made a note.
Because if we don't have it, maybe we can discuss what we should do, because it would be nice to have some protocol in place for the city.
With regard to human remains, there is state law. It comes under the state archaeologist's purview. I know with some of the past work that has been done in Westminster around rehabilitation of building foundations and such, the cities seem to be aware of the need to, in the event that something is encountered, to check further into it. But I don't know that there's a city ordinance, or whether it's just a matter of goodwill at the city level.
Well, and where Uplands is, you're talking about not City of Westminster. You're talking about Adams County, so that's the properties we've dealt with, if they were digging and found something that might be under the city, but for the purposes of Uplands, that's not the City of Westminster yet.
All of Uplands is Westminster. Only where the castle is unincorporated Adams County. So that field is in Westminster. Also, I would imagine you'll find a lot of bison bones, because this was a field where there used to be buffalo wallows. This was a collection place for the buffalo to come, and it was perfect for them to bathe in the summer in the dust, and in the winter those holes would fill up with snow and then eventually melt for drinking water. So it's really rich that way.
So that really makes it even more important. I think that is within the purview of the board, that if Rich, at the next meeting, you can tell us what kind of ordinances the city has, we might want to even kind of figure that out, because there's some level of responsibility we have for making sure that our resources are managed well, at least within the purview of the city. So maybe we even at that point propose, if there's no ordinance, should we even bring that to the city government's notice that maybe it's worth exploring.
Sure, and I'm happy to start that ball rolling tomorrow. Start the inquiries.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you both, Karen and Linda. Is there anything more about education? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to proposed regular meeting schedule for 2021. I see it's laid out. Are we voting on approving those dates, Rich?
I don't know that we need to approve them. We typically just post the dates and say, "Does this work for everybody?" And then it seems to be that this is the night of the week, unless the board feels differently, we can find a different one. But I think that Wednesdays have worked really well for everybody. So the dates proposed, we can certainly take a motion, but I don't know that it's necessary.
Is there
I
going to
made-
be a 2021?
Before we move on, I did want to acknowledge that our council liaison is on the call tonight. She has been listening in, and that's Councilor Lindsay Smith. So I would be remiss if I didn't thank her and acknowledge her, that she's a very active supporter of this group. And Lindsay, if you'd like to come on and just say something, you're certainly more than welcome to do so. Let's see. I just unmute. Lindsay, are you there?
You yes, sorry I couldn't unmute. It's not like a regular council meeting where I get that opportunity just to unplug and plug back in. But no, I've been listening in, like Rich has said, and I thank you all for your dedication and work to this group. I know that we don't meet often, but I appreciate what each of you do and contribute to our conversation here. And it certainly helps me as a council member to then be able to bring back to the full council this discussion as far as what you all are having. And particularly, and Rich, I'll connect with you afterwards, I'd like to share the information about our procedures as far as uplands and not just that, but any project that we have in the city. If we find any kind of remnants of history, what's the protocols for that? Because I think that's, as far as council's concerned, something that we would be of interest towards. So, and I didn't even think of that. So I believe, Linda, thank you for bringing that up as your huge knowledge base on that. So, but yes, thank you for all of what you do. We're not meeting again from what I understand until next year, 2021. So I hope each of you enjoy your holidays and you stay safe and stay well for the rest of the year. And hopefully we will come out of 2021 in a very positive light.
Yes, we don't have any other meetings scheduled for this year, unless, of course, a special meeting could always arise. If there were official business requiring a public hearing, then we would certainly be able to call. But we do make every effort to meet 4 times a year, as we are required under the Certified Local Government Program. So if anybody has any objections to those dates, please let me know sooner rather than later, because I would love to get those on the calendars for next year and get everything reserved. And hopefully, who knows, maybe we can meet in person before too long, because I know we certainly all miss that. I miss it very much, and this is a very poor substitute. But it's good to see all of your smiling faces or hear your voices.
I had one question with respect to that, kind of a two-parter, which is there a move afoot to have another board onboarding event, as there was this last year? And if so, how many are we onboarding as a
So the onboarding session that was held this past year was first of its kind, but it was really an effort to bring all of the boards together and speak to everybody collectively, and to show appreciation and to just tighten things up, if you will, so that we were making sure that everybody felt engaged and understood why we do things the way we do, and how some of the boards can even work together collaboratively. such as the Inclusivity Board, for instance. I don't know the plans, if that's going to be an annual thing or not. I think that's tricky now in the age of COVID. I think that maybe was the original intent. I don't know what that would look like, frankly, under the current conditions. But I think I agree. I thought it was a great initiative and very helpful. I got a lot out of it personally. So I will share with you if that is in the plans, but right now I would kind of be a little skeptical just because our brutal reality.
And the other side of that is, do we have 2 openings to be filled? Am I correct in that? Or 3?
Matthew, are you stepping down, or are you planning to serve in just not the leadership role?
I am not seeking reappointment, so I'm stepping down.
Okay.
So is that effective as of this meeting?
I think it's December 31st,
Okay.
officially.
So you'll make that known when the clerk's office reaches out to you, because they'll be doing so.
Yes, they did that a few weeks ago already.
So that means there will be 2. We will need 1 full-time member and 1 alternate member appointed. So I know that we'll be working with the clerk's office for those recruitments.
So Matthew, this is not related to the official meeting minutes, but I take it you're stepping down because you're actually moving?
I don't have immediate plans. I'm just opening up possibilities due to some life changes in my situation.
I understand.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you had a plan to go sit in someplace. Well, I certainly wish you luck. Like I said, we'll miss you.
Well, thank you very much.
Addition.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
If you decide to stay, seek reappointment. How about that?
Okay.
And thank you, Matthew, for serving in an interim position as our chair.
Yeah, almost 2 years interim. That's got to be a record, huh? But thank you very much. I was happy to do it. A little bit out of my comfort zone, of course, and I don't think I ever got any better at it. But I know Mary will do the office proud there, the chair. And eventually, Mary, you'll get a gavel, and that's the coolest part, and that's the part I miss the most. So
You're being modest. You did a stellar job.
Well, my predecessor was stellar, frankly. The one who I came in under, Chris. That's who I tried to live up to. If there's nothing else, I guess I should move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I shall move. Oh, I second. Sorry.
And all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, this Historic Landmark Board meeting is adjourned, 7:55 p.m. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a wonderful holiday season. Goodbye.
You too. You too. Bye-bye.